Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the closing segment of Praxis 2021. I think all of you would agree with me that the past 2 days has certainly been a thought-provoking exercise in reviewing, rethinking, and reimagining a post-COVID-19 Malaysia. Make no mistake, recovering Malaysia will be a colossal undertaking. It will require mending new and acute wounds and healing older chronic ones. It will compel us to address short-term concerns and at the same time mitigate the longer-term impacts and risk of the pandemic and recover from one of the worst economic crises that the nation has faced. It would also require discourse and an exchange of ideas across ethnicities, across urban and rural communities, across generations, and across different sectors. To this end, Praxis 2021 was deliberately designed to be forward-looking and adapting to a different landscape. Particularly in line with the need for recovering Malaysia, the conference was curated to get views from diverse voices. Topics that have emerged, whether it be directly due to the pandemic or due to factors that arose during these extraordinary times, were selected, and thanks to our speakers, some great ideas were put forward and discussed. Ladies and gentlemen, we started the conference by looking ahead to 2022 by providing an economic snapshot at the global and domestic levels. This session highlighted that we can be cautiously optimistic in terms of the economic outlook in that Malaysian economy should recover to pre-pandemic levels of economic output in 2022. Nonetheless, there are various structural issues that remain, including social protection systems, the need to look into our revenue base, and catalyzing sustainable and inclusive growth that requires more detailed responses in moving forward. We then looked into the topic of the day, which is COVID-19 and health, including looking into future pandemics. The session highlighted that when it comes to pandemic management, we must take an approach that is broader and preventive in nature. This includes taking stock of the populations that are left behind, ensure that we address the issue of inequality in terms of vaccination and social protection. Looking to the future, we also heard from a youth perspective on recovering Malaysia. It is clear that the time for youth in Malaysia is now more than ever. There's increased awareness of the role of youth in policymaking, in governance, in democracy, and similarly, youth are keen to get involved both online and offline, using both engagement and advocacy as well as online movements to make their voices heard. However, once again, social protections are required. The pandemic has impacted youth employment, mental health, and women participation in the workforce, and measures such as mental health protection and gender-responsive budgeting to cushion the impact of COVID-19 are suggested. One of the biggest shifts we have seen in the world is the acceleration of the digital economy. In session 4, we explored this impact to Malaysia and the region. In this context, the Southeast Asian region and Malaysia is one of the fastest growing digital markets in the world, and the pandemic has increased the number of digital consumers in Malaysia. However, Malaysia SMEs are only at the beginning of their digitalization journey and face large constraints towards increasing digital adoption in the country. Policymakers need to improve the digital skills of Malaysia's workforce, reduce digital divides, encourage entrepreneurship and risk-taking, and be aware of the sustainability of digital adoption. Finally, in the last session just now, we touched on sustainability. While sustainability has emerged as a focus during the pandemic, particularly in relation to economic, social, and governance, ESG, climate change, and so on, what is clear is the need to translate sustainability to the ground level, especially towards recovering from the crisis. The Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, provide a good instrument to mainstream sustainability, but it needs to be championed by local leaders through certain setups that translate these ideas into solutions. In this sense, the All-Party Parliamentary Group on SDGs, or APPGM SDG, provides such a model and mechanism for bipartisanship, and more importantly, to directly address solutions to the most vulnerable communities in a time which it is needed the most. Ladies and gentlemen, a few common themes emerged from the sessions. Firstly, while we can be cautiously optimistic, uncertainty remains, and uncertainty is the new norm. We may face new variants, we may face new pandemics, and we may face future risks, including a climate and biodiversity crisis and further supply chain disruptions. Moving forward, we need to better anticipate these future risks through, for example, preventive measures in pandemic management, such as better targeting and enhanced information systems. And in reality, we need to adapt to our practices to the new normal. For example, one specific suggestion is even adapting engineering practices to ensure better ventilation. MSMEs will also be required to move towards digitization. These suggestions would require an agile form of governance that will be capable to adapt to the changing and dynamic landscape and risks and opportunities that lie ahead. Secondly, and related to ensuring resilience, is the need for inclusiveness. The pandemic laid bare the inequality that persists in society, whether it be from an income perspective, the digital divide, gender, or age, as well as challenges faced by the MSMEs. Essentially, the pandemic has pushed the vulnerable to the edge. Many suggestions were highlighted, but the key response is to address both the short-term and long-term concerns. For example, in the short term, direct cash transfers would help alleviate immediate challenges. However, this needs to be balanced with addressing the social protection system holistically, including broadening the coverage as well as address issues such as mental health and youth unemployment. Finally, is the focus on sustainability, both from an environmental point of view as well as from a fiscal point of view. One of the areas that emerged strongly from COVID-19 is the realization of the need to build back better with stronger foundations. The environment is our life support system, and it was highlighted that we need to adapt to future crises brought about by climate change. To ensure fiscal sustainability, there was also suggestions on diversifying our revenue base as well as ensuring that coming up to the budget 2022 to be announced next week, there's a need to ensure that the appropriate amount of spending is allocated in an effort to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. However, sustainability needs to go to ground and require efforts from all members of the so-called Keluarga Malaysia, including members of parliaments, civil society organizations, academic and experts, private sector, and the public at large. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, with that, we come to the end of Praxis 2021, and all I have to left is to thank the key organizations and people that made this conference a success. I would like to thank our partners, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, for your enduring support, and also to CGS CIMB for making this conference possible. I would also like to thank my colleagues that has worked tirelessly to organize this conference. Of course, special thanks goes to all the brilliant moderators and speakers that provided thought-provoking ideas that will hopefully influence the discourse on recovering Malaysia moving forward. And finally, thank you to all of you for following Praxis 2021, and hopefully you also benefited from this year's conference. With that, I close Praxis 2021 and hopefully see you possibly in person next year for Praxis 2022. Thank you, have a great weekend ahead, and stay safe.